The Virginia governor's race is heating up with Abigail Spanberger and Winsome Sears sparring and competing ads over who's really protecting kids. And in the middle of it all, Senator Tim Kaine jumped in, stirring outrage by comparing our founders' belief in God-given rights to extreme terrorist states. Plus, the Minnesota church shooting tragedy is raising deeper questions about mental health, gender confusion, and hostility toward people of faith. We'll break it all down in today's episode. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candi Cushman, with our president, Victoria Cobb. Well, welcome to Speak Up Virginia, everyone. Glad to have you with us for another episode. And today we've got a lot to cover, but I think really fascinating topics to delve into. But I wanted to start out with more of a serious topic. And I know we've all had some time to process this horrific church shooting, where this shooter went in and shot at these kids praying, doing mass on the first day of their Catholic school. And you know, we didn't really take a moment at the time because it was also hectic to speak into this or really process with our audience. But we've seen more news coming out about it, and I think people are still trying to process all of the different facets of this.
Unfortunately, you know, we're in America, we're seeing these things, and it's just devastating. And I think this one, you know, it unfortunately had some similarities to ones we've seen in Nashville and others where I think we do have to talk about the mental health issues. And we're seeing that oftentimes, as one might expect, they are tied to people who are, one of the mental health symptoms is they're struggling around their gender. And that's real here.
And now there's evidence coming out to that. And I'll just share some of the things we've seen come out since then that I think we need to grapple with. So there's more come out about the writings in his journal. And I'll just say up front, it's hard to talk about this stuff. But like you said, I think we need to. And the New York Post actually had, I think, translated it because he had written it in his own kind of coding.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's information about that I want to share, but I'll just mention also information has come out that he had gone through the divorce of his parents.
Yeah, and this one is a factor that people kind of seem to leave out a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And we know it's so jarring when kids go through divorce. There's so many symptoms. And so to see that in here is not surprising. That's all part of the puzzle that makes somebody, I mean, who we are is anchored in who our family is. And that's a hard thing to go through.
Yeah, and it looks like he was just 11 years old probably when this divorce happened.
Really formative moment.
Then we get news that he had worked at a marijuana dispensary.
Yeah, I gotta ask what parent allows a kid, and I guess he's not a kid anymore.
He's, at this time he's in his 20s,
this is
early
the challenge,
20.
But it's like, my gosh, like if I were even my adult children, like you just wish you could be like, this is not where you need to be. And, you know, marijuana has such ties to psychosis. Like that.
Yeah.
That is coming out more and more, I think. I mean, people are finally talking about, like, marijuana is not just this harmful thing. There are real issues with psychosis with some people in marijuana.
Yeah, habitual use
seems to lead to, I mean, like, literally, like, schizophrenia. Like, you hear, like, I mean, it's alarming. And so he kind of has a really difficult set of factors that created, obviously, enough trauma and enough just distress that this is somehow how he thought he could remedy it. I don't know what goes into the mind.
In his mind, but I will share some things from that the Post had translated apparently in his journal, and I am going to give that caveat that this is a translation, but this is what we're seeing reported, that there were some notes in the journal that say, quote, I only keep, and he's referring to the long hair, because it is pretty much my last shred of being trans. I am tired of being trans. I wish I never brainwashed myself. And again, I want to...
Brainwashed myself is that's a very revealing phrase right there to me. It's like I convinced myself, you know, it's like I talked myself into something. I mean, it's kind of tragic.
And we know as a society that
there's so much brainwashing happening to individuals, but the idea of like, I brainwashed myself, it's like, I think honestly, he's missing that society has pushed him as much as himself.
At the very least, we need to take seriously what society is doing when they promote it as a cure-all that you can just...
That's the problem. So many folks that go through these gender transitions have all sorts of other things going on. And yet what they're told by the medical community is it's just this one issue that you think you're a different gender and you were born wrong or whatever the words they use. And they literally convince somebody that if you gender change, all of this other stuff will be remedied.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, we know from the entire detransitioner movement, that's not true.
Yeah. And let me, to that point, let me read some other notes that they've translated. Quote, I regret being trans. I wish I was a girl. I just know I cannot achieve that body with the technology we have today. I also can't afford that. And then elsewhere, the notes say, I don't want to dress girly all the time, but I guess sometimes I really like it. I know I am not a woman, but I definitely don't feel like a man. So you're seeing that confusion, that struggle. There's no other way to put it, just the angst, the struggle. And I
think what's so interesting about this is he lives in a state. I mean, we can't look at this outside the context of Minnesota. He lives in a state that has deemed itself a sanctuary city for trans kids, kind of the best environment he could possibly live in if endorsing this was the solution, right?
Yeah.
In fact, they are a state that, like Virginia was, banned conversion therapy. So his ability to get help that would try to help him convince himself that his body is good and that God did make him perfect and that he could realign his thinking, all of that is illegal in Minnesota like it was in Virginia until we had our lawsuit that basically invalidated that law. We finally can get help to kids in Virginia, but I can't help thinking all these places where kids can't get help. I don't want to say this is the only natural conclusion, but this is obviously one outcome of not being able to get this child help.
And let's break down what they mean when they use that word, conversion therapy.
They're talking about talk therapy. This is just if this child wanted to, for example, where he says, I don't feel like a man. If he wanted to feel like a man, and a counselor can help with that, but not in Minnesota. He could not go to a counselor and say, I want to get my brain, get my feelings to line up with my body. That would be illegal.
My biology,
Yes, that would be illegal in Minnesota.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I did look at the Minnesota law preparing for this, and it does spell out, if you're a professional, you cannot talk to them about trying to align to work on their gender identity. The only choice is to tell them to embrace it.
You can tell them to embrace it. You can tell them to go for surgery. And so the fact that this happened inside Minnesota is just an interesting fact to this story because you can't ignore context. This all happens in an environment. It happens in a legal environment. It happens in a family environment. We are the product of what we are able to be a part of. And this is truly something. So, these kids are not, there's where do you get your hope? Where do you find hope if you're just told, by the way, you transition, it'll solve everything, and then it doesn't?
Especially since we see the logical part of his brain is telling him, okay, like the technology here isn't working, that this isn't.
It doesn't. It isn't actually a cure. It doesn't actually.
It's very, tragic.
Yes.
All right. Well, the other disturbing part about this was, I would say, the real anger we saw coming out at Faith, which is so ironic because these are faith people in the faith community being victimized.
Yeah, it seemed like there was so little understanding that this was somebody who walked into a Catholic school of little children when the anchors and the different people, the news people were talking about it. And the mayor, basically, I think the comment was along the lines of like, don't offer us prayers. They were praying. It was like
literally praying. He said. What are you supposed to take from that except saying, "Oh, their prayers didn't work"? I don't know how you're supposed to interpret that. And then Gavin Newsom said pretty much the same thing.
And then Jen Psaki, I can't remember her exact quote, but she basically said something, along the very same lines. You want to put her quote up there?
Yeah, it sounded angry. Prayer is not freaking enough. Pardon my language, but I'm quoting Jen Psaki.
Yes.
Prayers, there's a grammatical mistake, but prayers do not end school shootings. Prayers do not make parents feel safe. I think we're missing the whole point of prayer here.
Well, I think my pastor put it really well. A couple weeks ago, he was doing a sermon series in Psalms, and he just said, praying doesn't necessarily mean that God will keep you from things, but it means he'll be with you through them. He'll walk with, it doesn't mean we get to avoid a life of tragedy or avoid hard things. Hard things happen even when we pray, but the idea that, they were praying, therefore obviously prayer doesn't work because somebody walked in while they were praying. I mean, that's an absurd, illogical statement, but it's clearly people who don't have faith, who don't understand faith, who can't comprehend the idea that God is the only solution to this. I mean, they think there's a bunch of political solutions. Well, they've been tried and failed. Clearly, we as a nation need to get on our knees and say, God, what is the pathway? How do we, really, if we look at the situation, how do we keep our families whole so kids don't go through divorce? How do we keep our kids feeling comfortable in their gender that God has given them with their body? Those are the solutions, and actually, most of those are in Scripture. They're actually part of, when we pray, that's actually the things God would hand us.
Those solutions are harder and require more thought than knee-jerk reactions.
Correct.
I was trying to get my mind around why they're saying, well, prayer, I'm tired of prayer, and I'm thinking, okay, these people don't even believe in God to start with, clearly. So in their mind, the best way I can understand it is God doesn't exist. Prayer is irrelevant. So let's just get to the knee-jerk reaction, the action, the political action I want you to take, because government is the salvation and solution that you need to go to, not God. He doesn't exist.
Right.
That's really what they're saying.
Yeah, I think when you don't believe in God, government has to be your God, because there has to be a way to control these situations, right? You have to solve these things. No one wants to live in a world with school shootings. So when you can't look to a higher power, when you can't say, God, we think of God is all wisdom, right? Like that is where the solutions come from. But if you don't view it that way, then it is a very political, it instantly becomes, we need political solutions to these problems. And then they start talking about, gun control and all of these things, which interestingly enough, Minnesota has red flag laws, but they're not going to red flag a child, well, he's not a child, but a trans individual because they think that's normal, right? So red flag, they would have had to have seen these kind of writings and these kind of, but it's just, that's why red flag laws are typically not effective. Because
I think there's good common sense protections to put in place, but we can get rid of all the weapons in the world, and it does not get rid of
knifings in other countries.
It does not get rid of the sickness of the human heart. It does not, and we're still going to have to deal with that part.
We are sinful people, and we struggle in an environment where our culture is affirming sinful things. So we head further down the wrong direction. So, of course, we're going to have tragic outcomes of that individually and collectively.
Well, one of the saddest parts to me of this whole thing is that the people out there saying, well, the prayers are useless, stop talking about stupid prayers, essentially what they're saying. And, well, where was God in this? I saw someone quoted, where was God in all this? They are saying what the killer wanted them to say. Because if you remember, on his gun, he had written, where is your God? So we're actually saying what he wanted us to say when we do that.
Wow.
And I want to say one other thing here. All of us have been through tragic things, heavy things in our life, and we've gotten to that point we know at the end it was God that was at the bottom of that pit.
Yeah,
it was question. None of this temporary earth stuff. Like if you've got to look at the eternal significance of God, of human beings. There's nothing else there when you really go through those things. And maybe that's the reason for the fallout of the death culture that we're seeing, because they're just having shallow, like it's empty.
And I can't help but think back to, for example, 9/11. Really tragic, horrible, and our country came together, and we did talk about God. So that was, that was a very different.
Talked about evil.
We had a very different reaction. But also after 9/11, more and more stories came out about how God prevented people from being in those buildings that day. There were lots of people who would have testified that God was very much at work in their individual situation because they were supposed to be on a plane or supposed to be in a. So it's just sad when we don't see, when people choose to box God out of the equation, to not even imagine. And there were older kids that were helping shielding younger kids. I bet those younger kids' parents, they would say the God was helping those older kids protect those younger kids. That's a blessing. And that comes straight from the divine.
And we always look to the fact that Jesus himself was willing to have his body broken for us, ultimately providing the redemption that we hope for. So anyway, you mentioned...
Heavy topic, but...
Yeah, we can't possibly cover it all, but we just wanted to address it a little bit. But you mentioned people boxing God in, and I want to move to another relevant example of that. in the politician world.
Yes.
Yeah, tell us what's going on with our very own Virginia U.S. Senator, Tim Kaine.
Oh, my heavens. I feel like I need to intro this with Tim Kaine, former governor of Virginia, attorney.
It's so scary.
I just feel like those titles need to go in front of him.
Ran for vice president of the United
States. He apparently felt the need, and this was during a hearing with Riley Barnes, who is being put up as Assistant Secretary of State as a nominee.
Yeah.
So he's in his confirmation hearing. Yeah. And interestingly enough, this guy actually served under Ambassador Sam Brownback, who we had on this podcast last week. So he comes from some really great roots and some really great...
He understands religious freedom.
Correct. He understands religious freedom. So he's in his hearing, and Senator Kaine actually prepared a statement. So this wasn't a reaction.
Oh my goodness, I didn't think about that.
When I first heard what he said, you hear it on Twitter first. I actually heard it in a group chat. So what happens when any of our politicians say something this stupid, my entire national group chain of all the people that do my job in other states, we all start ripping each other for how embarrassing, who's got the worst politician. It's sort of so that's where I actually heard it first. But then you go and you watch the clip. And maybe, should we show the clip or should we? Anyway, let me tell you basically what's in here.
I'm just going to say, essentially, he said that our founding fathers' beliefs that we have God-given rights, right, unalienable rights that come from God, is equivalent to what terrorist state believe. Yes. And in case you think we're exaggerating, we are going to play this clip.
Play the clip, and then let's check.
Mr. Barnes, I was struck by your opening comments, and I asked to get a copy of them so I could read them and make sure I quoted them correctly. You state, and this is a quote from Secretary Rubio, our rights come from God, our creator, not from our laws, not from our governments. I find that very, very troubling. I'm a devout person. I was a missionary in Honduras. We've got other devout folks in this room, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, American. The notion that rights don't come from laws and don't come from the government, but come from the creator, that's what the Iranian government believes. It's a theocratic regime that bases its rule on Shia law and targets Sunnis, Baha'is, Jews, Christians, and other religious minorities. And they do it because they believe that they understand what natural rights are from their creator. So the statement that our rights do not come from our laws or our governments is extremely troubling. I think the motto over the Supreme Court is equal justice under law. The oath that you and I take, pledge to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, not arbitrarily defined natural rights. I'm a strong believer in natural rights, but I have a feeling if we were to have a debate about natural rights in the room and put people around the table with different religious traditions, there would be some significant differences in the definitions of those natural rights.
All right, Victoria, break this down for us, since apparently some people need Civics 101. What is wrong with the claim that our rights come from the government and not God?
All right. Go straight to our Declaration of Independence. This is a founding document. People think of it as this is the core, this is what frames our philosophy, what is sort of our founding principles of the nation on which the rest of the documents are built, basically. And it says we hold these truths to be self-evident, obvious, known. Here we go. We hold them to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. That means we as a country on our founding, in the very opening words, we basically set our whole government up, said our rights are natural. They come from above. They aren't created by the government. The only thing that it talks about with our government is that our government protects those already existing natural rights that are given from God.
The government protects, doesn't give.
And
those rights.
Tim Kaine wants to act as if that's not the founding of our whole nation, that there's something wrong with that notion, is so saying. By the way, also, we're from Virginia. This document written by Thomas Jefferson, a Virginian, kind of part of, we're sort of like one of those places. There's only a few in the country where all these things happened and all these people lived, and you should know them better than anyone else. And Tim Kaine literally prepared this statement. He actually says, I went and got your script, went and got what you said. He actually thought about this. and said that we're basically to say what our Declaration of Independence says is to be like Iran.
He's saying the opposite of what Thomas Jefferson said, our founding fathers said. He is saying straight out, our government, no, it doesn't come from God, it comes from the government. Help us understand why is that scary? What he's saying, what someone quoting the founders is saying is disturbing. I think his word was that it was extremely disturbing.
Yes, he's extremely disturbed by Thomas Jefferson himself, apparently.
Yeah. Why is what Tim Kaine is saying actually the disturbing part here?
Governments can come and go. They can change. They can be built on all types of philosophies. Your rights today will not be your rights tomorrow. If it depends on a group of people, and if it turns into majority rule, it's just going to be what we vote in, what we vote out. And I mean, that is a horrific thought. And it is that concept that our rights are just simply protected by government, but given by God. It is that has made our entire country so great. It is literally that notion that everything else sits upon that has made us the freest people, that makes us a respecter of human rights in so many ways, that makes us, when anything goes wrong in this country, half the time it's because we're failing to remember that there's a right that God has given someone, and we're not acknowledging that.
Yeah. Think about it. If there's nothing eternal, intrinsic, then it literally is at the whim of the current ruler. But I think where people may get confused, maybe not necessarily
like
our
a
audience,
theocracy or something.
Yeah, he's making
it sound like
that terrorist states that's what they believe. And my first thought was,
not really, because they don't respect the right to life over
right.
in
There's
those
the right
places.
to life issue. But what you're really confusing is they act like kings, and kings thought they were, ordained by God, that they were they tried to sell that they're equivalent to God, like the Pharaoh, and I would say that's similar to clerics in these terrorist states, which is not the same thing as the religious freedom principles that we are founded on.
It is just stunning to think if this guy could have been our vice president of the United States with this view. And also, I have to, maybe one other title that, I don't know if it's a title, but an adjective that needs to go with Tim Kaine is he's Catholic. That has to be noted because Tim Kaine is a Catholic. He has always talked about his faith, touted his faith. Guess what Catholics believe? That we have natural rights from God. And so it's stunning to me that in this statement, I get how when we worry about revisionist history, this is what we worry about. When we say we don't want people revising history and acting like the Constitution is living and breathing and changing, it's because you end up with statements like this. But it's even more stunning, I think, that you have somebody who actually himself should believe in natural rights by a matter of his faith and know it as a matter of his law degree and then spits it out in front of the whole world to see.
Maybe this is another case of saying the quiet part out loud, but I think it is a serious concern if you have people in our government that no longer recognize that we have intrinsic rights from God. That's a problem.
I think it's interesting this is a confirmation hearing because I truly believe if you hold this view, somehow you should not be allowed in office. There should be a litmus test that says, do you agree with our founding principles, just at least in big, broad brush concept? Okay, then we'll let you run for office. Because I'm a little afraid that we have people in office that don't even, know or acknowledge or, it's one thing to say, I don't agree with anything that is actually what our nation founded on, but he acted as if our nation is founded on the exact opposite. He acted as if the governing philosophy, that the governing philosophy of our country is actually the exact opposite of what it was built on.
Well, not only that, but we have people like the socialists in New York that could very well be elected. So this does make you get concerned about basic civics in this country and why it's important.
We've got to go back to educating. We've got to go back to encouraging people that it matters how it was intended to be set up because that is what has given us hundreds of years of some freedom and some rights being protected. And all those things can go away overnight if the government is the one that creates the rights.
Yeah. Okay, well, since we're on the topic of politicians, I think we got to talk about this ad war going on right now in this governor's race. It's really heating up. There was a wide percentage disparity, but it seems like, at least at the time that we were looking at it, maybe things were closing in at least a little bit, they're narrowing the gap a little bit. And this resulted And this slate of ads coming out from Abigail Spanberger and Winsome Sears. But in the backdrop that's made this really fascinating is all this craziness going on in the Nova schools.
Yeah. It's funny how our issues tend to end up in these commercials, the things that we work on that, sometimes people want to dismiss as sort of like, oh, those are fringe issues. We got to talk about jobs. No. This is what people actually care about. And this is what's going on. And the elected officials and the candidates have to respond to it. And so, yes, we saw this we go backwards 4 years. We saw this in the Youngkin McCullough race where, again, there was crazy issues going on. Loudoun County, first it was the book, there was a bill about explicit, and that's what came up in the debate. That's what came up in their debate that became the infamous line that sort of took out Terry McAuliffe for governor. But then it was followed up by there was a horrific sexual assault in a bathroom in Loudoun right before the election. And all of a sudden, it's, we really got to talk about this stuff, and parents really do matter. And that's what ushered in Governor Youngkin. And here we're back again. What's interesting is what I'm most fascinated by is just that I don't think that the most of the Democrat candidates don't appear to have learned a lesson from losing McAuliffe to the governor. Right? Like I don't think they, they're still not responding to protect parents' rights.
And the crazy thing is, it's the same school, like
it's
down to the high school.
I literally feel like we're like, in like run it back, replay mode.
Because, and you know why? Because they haven't changed the policy.
Right. The policy still stands.
That allows males to enter these spaces.
Yep. Bad stuff
and
still happening.
And girls vice versa. So still got the kids dealing with the ramifications of this and the parents trying to say this isn't appropriate.
Yes. So Winsome Sears put out a pretty hard-hitting ad on this.
She's put out a couple. Yeah. Let's play one of them. Yeah, let's just hear this ad.
I reached out to Democratic gubernatorial candidate Abigail Spanberger's campaign yet again on the locker room issue.
So far, she's not responded.
Her campaign wouldn't give an answer.
She has refused to comment.
She still hasn't responded.
And she can't even speak out about an 80-20 issue.
Abigail Spanberger, nothing.
This sign that reads, "Hey Winsome, if trans can't share your bathroom, then blacks can't share my water fountain," has gotten a lot of attention online.
I'm elected to represent everyone, even those who hate me. I am there trying to protect everyone's children, Democrats' children, Independents' children, Republicans' children, they're all children.
Abigail Spanberger's statement is non-existent.
In Loudoun County, they have punished several young men who were filmed surreptitiously by a trans-identifying young woman who was in their locker room.
We still have not heard where Abigail Spanberger stands.
It's pretty incredible that that's not an easy question to answer.
And Winsome Sears has gotten on the press conference circuit.
It is time for the insanity to stop.
Yeah, and that ad has one of our legal cases mentioned.
Yeah, it's funny how our rally, our press conference, these things keep making it into the light. And then also, I think it's important to note, in that issue that happened in Arlington, in that commercial, you see the person holding the sign.
Yeah.
So if you remember, there was a really awful sign that basically said, if you won't let trans in my bathroom, I'm not going to let
blacks use the water fountain. I don't know what.
Water fountain, or you use my water fountain. I forget how it was phrased. So that made it into that commercial because I think people were pretty horrified that, again, there's that analogy where they have been trying to compare the LGBT issues with race issues. That's been going on for a long time. And so it's just interesting that the natural conclusion of that really actually is racism. But, because you're completely invalidating the experience of Black Americans when you try to compare it to the experience of trans Americans today. It's just, absolutely a ridiculous comparison. But then when it pops up on a racist sign like that, so anyway, that has now really entered the race and been a lot of discussion.
This kind of exposes the problem with identity politics because you get this reverse racism. So again, the quiet part gets kind of exposed on a sign.
Yes.
But that was interesting, to see that reflected in that ad as well. But then she put out another one as well that was super hard hitting. And, I also want to mention the whole reason Winsome Sears went to the Arlington School Board because she was speaking on this issue of letting
Sexual
the males
predator.
into the girls' bathrooms and how that can open up the door to predators.
And
Arlington
did open
County,
up the door.
Yeah, Arlington County dealt with that specifically.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this whole thing that happened in Arlington, I think we'll put a picture on the screen to at least show you the ad.
Yeah.
Because what I love about that ad is the voiceover, which you won't hear, but it basically says, this woman, and then there's like a arrow, not a woman, pointing at a male sexual predator who claims he's a woman in order to get into
clearly not
inappropriate spaces. Clearly not a woman. So anyway, I think that's pretty powerful because people. That's the threat, right? Is that people are going to abuse the policy and walk in and take advantage of innocent and deprive people's privacy.
Yeah.
And
there was a record of this guy with actually having offenses or being on the record that as a sexual predator. It's very disturbing that he got free access to where little girls are simply by declaring that he's trans or, identifies as a woman, however he identifies.
And when these policies started, I can't help but remind people when there started being discussions about policies allowing trans individuals, kids that believe they're a different gender, to walk into a biologically wrong bathroom, we would go into school board after school board and say, this policy is unsafe. It opens the doors for bad actors, people who will take advantage of that. And they looked at us like we were crazy when we first started saying that. And sure enough, unfortunately, that's what happened because we know human nature. It's not that hard to predict this from happening. And so I'm glad Winsome is showing up at school boards. I think every politician ought to be Democrat, Republican, Independent. You ought to be showing up at a school board meeting and saying, this is wrong, fix this policy.
Regardless of your party, at least this is shining a light on
I'd like to see
an issue that
I'd like to see Abigail Spanberger show up at a thing and say this, but we haven't seen that yet.
Haven't seen that yet, but apparently it is hitting a nerve because she did recently come out with an ad that, kind of addresses this. It does mention the claim that it mentions lies being told about her. So let's just play that real quick.
I'm Abigail Spanberger, mom to 3 girls in public school. Nothing matters more to me than the safety of all our kids. And as a law enforcement officer, I went after child predators. So it really angers me to hear these lies about who I am. I believe we need to get politics out of our schools and trust parents and local communities. As a mom and as your governor, I will be focused on making our schools the best in the nation.
Spanberger for governor. Service. Country.
Well, you'll notice, it highlights her background in law enforcement. She has 3 daughters, and it's kind of now this debate over, okay, who's really about protecting kids?
Well, it's interesting because I think the situation that the Democrat Party has put their candidates in is because they are all about these trans issues. They always were. They were the ones pushing these policies. So they're in this awkward place where now they've got a problem. What has been shown to be, and the public is moving back in no, this is not a safe policy. So they're now in a position where the thing they've always pushed for and defended is now opposite public opinion. So what's happening is, and this ad is a great example of it, is their candidates, Abigail Spanberger in particular, is having to basically, when she's confronted with this issue, she has to pivot to safety. And I saw in a different interview, she pivoted to educational excellence and I'm a mom. But she actually doesn't, she can't actually speak to the policy directly because she can't say it's a bad policy or she's defying previous votes she's taken. She's literally voted on these issues.
They all voted in lockstep.
Right.
1, to block efforts to protect girls in their locker rooms. And 2, other legislation, maybe, I don't know if you can remind us, was it the Equality Act or something?
Yes.
That opens the floodgates to these sorts of things.
So they're in an uncomfortable spot where they have to say, okay, I was wrong, or sort of look like you're addressing the issue, but not quite address the issue because you're going to upset a constituency that is part of your base. So they're in a moment, and in particular, the governor's race is, of course, the most limelighted one. So these commercials are sort of in for that. And it makes a very difficult situation. Again, we'd like to see every politician on every side of the aisle come out in the right place on this. It's okay if you have to, actually say, I was totally wrong, because you were totally wrong. Anyone who voted for this stuff was totally wrong.
Good point.
Join the cause. Parents are waiting.
I noticed the other tactic, of course, for any politician is to change the subject.
Right.
And so we see a lot of ads coming out from Spanberger against Winsome, either with MAGA, really big letters.
Yeah. Tired of Trump because that.
Yeah, or trying to say that she's for big government spending.
That's kind of a funny one because if you actually know the candidate, I don't know where they come up with that. But, there was the big, beautiful bill, and there's a lot in that big, beautiful bill. And so because Winsome endorsed that bill verbally, that's what's being attacked. But there's also a lot of tax cuts in that bill. So it's a interesting way to go.
Yeah.
But I like it I'll say this. When both parties have to sound like they are about tax cuts, we're in the right place.
And parental rights.
Right. When you all have to sound like you're conservative, pro-family people, join.
Yeah,
Jump
there's
in.
a win in there somewhere.
Yes, the win is for the pro-family cause, that whether it's popular or it's not, we say what is true and what needs to happen, and eventually, people come along.
Any other takeaways from election season here?
No, but it will get more interesting. We're only in September, early September. It always starts heating up around Labor Day. It heats up faster these days because of early voting. So you see more of these really aggressive commercials a little bit earlier in the season because just remember, early voting around the corner. Voter guides are coming out. They're on our website.
Yeah,
so,
we do have voter guides on the website.
The website real quick.
So, yeah, just go to familyfoundation.org. You'll see a big banner there for voter guide. Make sure you access that. We at least have the ones online at the moment.
Absolutely. And you just put in your address, and it'll tell you. Like, you might not know what delegate district you're in and all of that. You can just go ahead and put your address in, and it'll tell you.
Well, since we're on the topic of politicians, Democrats, I got to say, I think we have a really good candidate for our inconceivable segment. We haven't done that in a while. And we've been seeing some news coming out that some Democrats are telling other Democrats that they have to stop saying certain words, that certain words are now banned because, wait for it, they're sounding a little too cray-cray. They're not sounding normal.
And they're right. They are crazy. It does sound crazy.
Well, it's that time again. Time for our Inconceivable Moments Award. This is where we're featuring examples of the absolute lunacy and craziness that happens when cultural leaders try to give guidance completely apart from biblical principles. And we're calling this the Liberals' Most Inconceivable Moments Award.
Inconceivable!
Okay, Victoria, bring us up to speed on this banned word list for Democrats.
So, there's this group called The Third Way, and they describe themselves as like a center-left research and strategy kind of group, and they've put out this memo, and it's to all Democrats. Well, we'll put the image on the screen, and let me tell you who it's actually addressed to. So it says it's, as you see, it's addressed to all who wish to stop Donald Trump and MAGA.
All right, let's just camp out there for a minute. I want people to understand before we go into this, this is not a memo to conservative people, all right? This is to the Democrats, clearly.
They're trying to clean up their own camp.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, so there's this memo, and it provides 45 words Democrats should stop saying so they can stop sounding, quote, like enforcers of wokeness.
Yeah. Apparently, they're just waking up to the fact that this is the camp they've been in all this time.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought that's actually, I thought they were creating that camp. Like, they actually, and did the blueprints.
That's the thing. We're going to get to these words. But they have been saying these words, I don't know, for a decade now, and trying to force us to say them.
I mean, no kidding. These words, I swear there was probably a memo, and I don't know if it was 5 or 10 years ago, what the timeline would have been, where these words are actually handed out to everybody and said, use these, don't use the normal words, so use all these words because then you sound inclusive and you sound welcoming and you sound whatever. And literally it's as if they've grabbed that memo back, thrown a big X on it and said, no, just kidding. Don't say all of those same words.
And this is coming from Democrat strategy.
Yeah.
And one of the words, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but one of them is birthing people. They tried to force us to say that word.
They tried to force it into our code.
It is in our code.
They put it in our law. This wasn't like a slang thing. This is we think this is the permanent new term that needs to be used instead of, moms. But anyway, that's an aside. But I think also what's notable about this is that they've been using these words. I think you make the point. They've been trying to force everyone else to use these words, and we're the ones that were supposed to look crazy for not like adopting all this new language. But now, see what they're doing right now is they're assessing elections. I mean, we gotta understand they have had some big losses, and I think the presidential was really an eye opener for them because they lost all sorts of people.
All right, I'll just also
we gotta say
share
what the words are.
Well, also I want to also just share the setup for this in their memo. If we have that on the screen again, it also says that they use, quote, an awful lot of words and phrases no ordinary person would ever dream of saying. So that's just another way of saying. That's another way of saying it.
Normal.
Not normal.
Not normal.
Yeah.
So I guess we should go through. Do you want to go through some of these words?
Yeah,
They're in categories.
right.
They're in sections.
Yeah. So let me explain this a little bit. So what they've done is divided these up into different categories, and basically the categories fall into these general areas. And this is kind of how I'm labeling them, and not how they have. But it falls into the area of one, crazy political correctness words, and then. Another one centers around trying to deny the existence of crime. I think they say explaining the crime away. And then there's the whole gender ideology craziness category.
Yes. So let's start with some of the woke terminology. We've all heard the term intersectionality until we're blue in the face. But that's one, marginalized communities, I guess they said minoritized communities, which, whatever. I mean, all these Latinx, which
That one really makes me laugh because I knew Hispanics, Latinos that hated that term, and they're just not figuring this out.
I think we've known that all along. I think they were really slow to the uptake on that one. And allyship, we all got to be.
You're in space right there with allyship. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's just go right into the crime part.
Yes.
So you'll see the heading. It's their heading, explaining away crime.
Which at least they admit that they are explaining away crime. I know they're probably saying that they're not, and these words make it sound like they are.
That.
But they actually are always explaining away crime. They're always on the side of the criminal. I don't understand that, but anyway.
This one really makes me laugh. Involuntary confinement.
I would call that you're an inmate, that you have been
do we have voluntary inmates? I would just like to know.
I don't think so. I don't know any.
They're all involuntary.
Yeah, one would think, but also incarcerated people. We can't say that these are inmates. They're incarcerated people. Okay, but
prisoners.
They're prisoners. That's kind of the normal. Criminals, prisoners.
Anything but what it is.
I hadn't thought about it, but they really never use the word criminals. That's our word, which used to be everybody's word. But
yeah,
I mean,
if we wanted to get theological, we could just talk about how we just want to ignore there is any reality of people sinning.
Justice,
at all.
It's a real thing.
Yeah,
it's important.
Yeah.
And justice isn't always just making sure the criminal goes off, which sometimes is how they use the term justice. Yeah. It's really just,
so much to say about all these, but let's jump right in.
We got a lot of words.
Yeah,
we haven't talked about the gender words 45.
Yet.
We got to talk about the gender words.
All right. Again, birthing people, pregnant people, chest feeding.
Yeah, well, it's not a thing anyway, so we could stop talking about it.
It's fictional.
Absurd. It's absurd. But also, I hate the term cisgender. That's one of my, I just think that's so ridiculous because that's.
This is really fascinating because one thing I noticed looking at these words is I think they're finally realizing that the people they're referring to are actually getting offended. So when you
heteronormative.
You have birthing, person, pregnant people, chest feeding, you've just made a whole lot of women mad.
Yeah. Yeah, you have.
Don't replace mom and mother.
Yes, I think it doesn't matter whether you're left or right. If you're a mom, that's what you want to be called. That's what you've earned by giving birth or adopting a child like that. You're doing the hard work of motherhood. I just think that has isolated them from a lot of people. And then they have patriarchy on here, which we have to talk about because I think truly they're starting to figure out there's lots of women who actually are choosing to. The numbers are actually increasing of women choosing to go home and raise kids for a period of time and exit the workforce. And they used to that used to be lumped in with you're caving into the male dominated patriarchy and of course the men who are just out there trying to do male things and raise a family and
that's why I
think they've offended them.
Patriarchy is on here because they're constantly insulting men.
Yes,
this is an insulting term, and they know they're losing lots of young men to the other party.
Oh, the numbers are astronomical. The men are, and the young men are kind of done with it. They're like, I'm not going to be told what I don't have to wear skinny jeans, and I don't have to, maybe I shouldn't use that as an example, but really, truly, I'm actually seeing the trend in jeans is coming back to like normal jeans on guys. No offense to the guys that like skinny jeans, but it's nice to see some of these things are moving back in the right direction. I am curious. They have on this list dead naming, and I'm a little curious what they're going to call that. What is the alternative? So dead naming is the idea that I actually birthed a child that was a biological female. Her name was Cindy, and she thinks she's a guy, and now she wants to go by Harry. And so Cindy, if you refer to this new child, this new idea of Harry as Cindy, that's dead naming. I don't know another word for that, but we do all think that's ridiculous because the child was given the name Cindy with her biological sex that God gave her.
The story beneath the story here is that they're seeing that parents want to be respected. You don't want to be vilified as a parent. If you're trying to help your daughter or son do something healthy, you're trying to help them embrace their biology, their God-given biology. And that was a way to, kind of to be pejorative to parents. And so you've got the other side of the story here is the rescindance of parental rights. Yeah. And, man-woman marriage.
Yes.
And I noticed biology.
I noticed they have LGBTQIA plus on there. And that's just a funny one because, they had to keep adding letters. Remember, it was like lesbians and gays. And it was like, we're going to add transgenders into this. And then it was like, well, what if you're questioning? Because then we can add all these kids that, have, the slightest thought of this or confusion, So they just kept adding. And I think all sorts of people started thinking, like, this is absurd. Like, at some point, the list, but their philosophy of inclusiveness kind of forced that many letters. I mean, you're always leaving somebody out if you're putting letters together.
I mean, how many times have we heard this alphabet soup from the media still?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, did
I don't
CNN
know what they're gonna...
and NBC get this memo? Are they going to stop using LGBTQIA plus?
This is the thing. At the bottom of all of this is that they have to change their actual principles and beliefs to get guys back on board. It's not, these words are just reflective of what their ideas are. Their ideas are bad. And so honestly, like, they can do all this and they're going to sound less crazy, and that might win over the person who is completely ignorant of what the actual viewpoints are. But if you know that they actually are in favor of boys and girls bathrooms, or that they really do think that men who go to work every day and provide for their family and women who stay home, they have to actually change their ideas.
Yeah. Well, that gets to a question I wanted to ask you, because on one hand, we know that language is how you win the debate a lot of times. And so when you see people adjusting language to your principles, I don't want to say your principles because I think a lot of these principles are eternal, but when you see them adjusting language, that is a big win. That is a sign that we're winning. But how long-term is this win? How seriously do you take this? What do Christians need to do, because as you're saying, it doesn't necessarily mean that they've changed their beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, we want to take the victory lap. Like, right in this moment, it is really tempting to be like, we've won. They have to rename everything. They have to go back to all the standard vocabulary. But here's what I need to say is that they are relentless. The left, I mean, they just keep working, keep angling, keep changing words, keep changing definitions. I mean, the whole idea of gender didn't even exist. It was not in our vocabulary 50 years ago at all. I mean, people did not, you had a sex.
Yeah.
And that covered it all. And they created not just a word, but a definition, but literally like an entire segment of law out of this construct that they created. And so we gotta always be vigilant to protect vocabulary, protect the definition of words.
We have gender identity in the school policies.
Correct. They have absolutely. So I just think we have to be very vigilant to know that this might be the current list, but they could reissue the same list 5 years from now and go, hey, back to these words. These are the, or they could find 45 other words that make no sense and sound ridiculous and start adopting them and convincing us. I mean, the goal is not just that they use them. It's that they want the whole world to, adopt these words because you're adopting their ideas when you're part of their language. Language carries with it so much. And so anyway, we got to stay vigilant on that one.
All right. So what can Christians do?
All right. The most important thing is we have got to, as the church, realize that we have eternal words. Our words that are true in the scripture, the concepts, I mean, it's great to see them all come into our ideas at this moment, but they were just as true 5,000 years ago, whatever, as they are today. We absolutely don't need to flex with all these changes in vocabulary. We need to stay the course, stand on the rock. And sometimes in this moment, like this moment, we get proven true and normal. But our ideas are solid. They're eternally true, and we ought to stand by them. And I would just say that puts us on team normal.
Oh my goodness.
Team normal. I'm on team
tell
normal.
me you were doing
I'm
this.
staying on team normal. These guys want to be on team normal. I don't think they're going to get there, but Christians need to stay on team normal. This is actually Todd's. I have to disclose.
Okay.
It's Todd, our policy director. This is actually his hat. I borrowed it.
You
it
wear
probably
that
looks
well.
probably looks way
I
cooler
love
on him,
it.
but I thought it was super fun. I saw it in his office. I was like, this is right on point. We are
That's
team
awesome.
normal. Go team normal. We're going to win this in the end.
I cannot wait to see the meme that we're going to make out of this with you in this hat. That's awesome.
Yep.
Okay. But when you mention it's kind of hard to talk seriously to you now.
I'm sorry. You were on the
keep it
serious
awesome.
section. I was on the let's have fun and make fun of this ridiculousness.
Trying to be serious now.
Okay. All right.
You mentioned Christians need to stay solid on the eternal principles. And I just love that because it brings us full circle. Because, we talked about the eternal principle earlier in this podcast that we are created in God's image, that our intrinsic rights come from our Creator. And here we are. And it gets back to that because you wouldn't have all this crazy political identity craziness if everyone truly had a deep understanding of their inherent worth as human beings created.
Yes.
So we're
Scripture
back
gives
to
us
there.
the ideas. We don't have to adopt. And the church sometimes falls down this road. Our words are unity, one with Christ. Our words, we have words for all
For
the
Christians,
stuff.
we're talking to. Yeah.
Yes, for Christians, we have words that describe how we are to love one another. It's all there. And when we sort of start adopting and morphing, we're actually adopting division that wasn't in Scripture, that isn't intended in Scripture, between races, between ideology. It's just, we're intended to
let's just be glad there's an agreement still in society of what normal is.
Yes.
And so we can be on team normal.
Yes, team
and
normal.
let's hold the line so that at some point in time, people just forget entirely what normal is. So I'm
Yes.
thankful we still know what normal is.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us. If you want to be able to share what you heard today with friends and family, look for that Speak Up Virginia playlist on YouTube, or you can go to familyfoundation.org and find your way to our YouTube channel. And again, look for that playlist, Speak Up Virginia. Also, if you're listening on Apple and Spotify, a great way to help us reach more people is give us that 5-star review if you appreciate the information we are bringing. And remember, we are stronger when we speak together. We'll see you next time.